In the last 25 years, there were at least 50 murders of women that have gone unsolved in the city of Chicago. All the murders occurred in a horrific fashion, with all being either strangled or suffocated with something like a plastic bag. The victims' bodies are always dumped somewhere out in the open, usually in alleys or vacant buildings, and always a place that is easy to find. These killings have led many to speculate that a serial killer has been at work in Chicago. Despite some incredible common characteristics, the Chicago police, though, have rejected the idea these cases could be connected and that a serial killer is roaming the streets. In this episode, we will explore the theory and evidence around the figure who has came to be known as the Chicago Strangler. Since 1999, there have been at least 50 women murdered, often in horrific ways. The victims typically fit a very similar profile. They are young women, black, living risky lives, and are vulnerable. Often the women work as prostitutes or are addicted to drugs. In general, they are seen as outcasts of society. In addition to this, nearly all the women have been found to be strangled or asphyxiated to death with something like a plastic bag. Almost all had their clothes stripped, and the majority were victims of sexual assault. In addition to this, all the victims were found in places that they would be very easy to find. It's hard to understate the brutality of the murders, though. In 2007, Teresa Bunn, 8 months pregnant, was strangled to death and stripped of her clothes. The murderer then threw her body in a dumpster and set it on fire. In less than 48 hours, another woman named Hazel Lewis was strangled to death. Her body was thrown in a trash can behind a school and burned. Not surprisingly, all the murders have happened in a concentrated area in Chicago. More specifically, they have occurred just inside 3 police districts around the south and west side. These areas have some dangerous places and are known for rampant drug use and crime. Many speculate that the killer could be living in the area or possibly working there. Others think the assailant travels into the area and targets this vulnerable population, knowing the police aren't too interested in solving these crimes. One of the most fascinating and interesting pieces of evidence around this case concerns the work being done by Thomas Hargrove, the founder of the Murder Accountability Project, or MAP. Hargrove is accomplished at analyzing and finding patterns in crime data. Hargrove studied serial killer Gary Ridgway and his patterns and noted that it took years before police picked up on the trend. Hargrove has stated, "We know this is a series. We have no doubt." Hargrove's MAP project analyzes trends in crime data, looking for similar characteristics. He says it's odd for all the corpses to be found outdoors, and also, Hargrove points out a sexual assault happened in about 75% of the cases. One other strong piece of evidence Hargrove notes is the break in the killings from 2014 through 2017. It seems odd that these stopped for a few years and then started back up. It seems to suggest that the killer took time off for some reason. Some speculate he may have moved away, while others think he could have gone to prison for a few years. It's long been known that killers follow a MO, or method of killing. Strangulation has been seen before by serial killers who are driven by a sexual urge. Some of the more famous ones in U.S. history are the Boston Strangler and Hillside Strangler, both of whom were eventually apprehended. It should be said the police seem to have explored the possibility of this. They met with Hargroves even, but according to their statement, the DNA tells a different story. The police have stated that they have found about 21 different pieces of DNA at the crime scenes. They have reiterated that there's no connection among them and that they don't have the evidence. Many of the victims' families, though, have criticized the police and the lack of effort on these cases. Before diving into the weakness of the police's statement, it's important to look at Chicago crime the last 15 years. Chicago has led the United States in homicides for the last 12 years, the city has a long history of political corruption dating back to Al Capone, and currently is said to have at least 100,000 gang members. If a serial killer was to pick a city to operate in the US, there would be no better choice than Chicago. Coming back to the police and their statement around the DNA, it seems that finding different DNA at the scenes doesn't prove a serial killer doesn't exist. Most of the victims were found in open areas where we could expect other DNA to be found. For example, we could expect to find hair samples around a dumpster as workers throw the garbage away. This isn't the first time we've seen a serial killer theory raised by someone outside the police force. One example of this is the smiley face killers. Two retired detectives began investigating a series of homicides around the country, all with similar MOs. They believed that a nationwide network of serial killers drug young men at a bar or party, and once they become dull enough, they abduct them, hold and torture the victims before finally killing the men and dumping the bodies in the water. At the crime scene, there is some type of smiley face found nearby. Some chalk up the smiley faces to coincidence, while others point out the similarities in these cases. Does a serial killer currently exist in Chicago? There's compelling circumstantial evidence that there is. At the very least, it seems highly probable that one person was responsible for more than one of these murders. Still, it appears the last murder happened in 2018. Did the murderer move, or is he currently incarcerated? Is he dormant? With over 50 unsolved of these specific types of murders, it's surely troubling that there are so many open cases. Hopefully in time, we will learn who committed them, and the families of the victims can get some type of closure.